All right, Shavua Tov. So I had a question about the introduction to the Mishneh Torah, and I gave a short answer to it, but I figured there's a lot of people that could benefit from a longer explanation of it. So I recommend everybody learn Mishneh Torah. It's the only complete codification we have of halakha to this very day. Um, so we're going to talk about the introduction to there. A bold statement, but I think is true, is that all one needs to be a firm Jew is to get a Chumash, the five books of Moses, and a Mishneh Torah. And we'll talk about why that is. But if you master Mishneh Torah, you'll know more than 99% of the rabbis out there. This is not to say that I've mastered all of Mishneh Torah, but I've certainly mastered parts of it. So just going through it will expose you to all areas of halachot because it's the only complete codification that we have. So if you're going through things like the Shulchan Aruch, you're not going to find a lot of things like how the Sanhedrin functioned, how they issued capital punishments, temple sacrifices, things like that. So it will really take you from wherever your knowledge level is and skyrocket you up to a much higher level. So I recommend everybody going through it. So let's go to screen share, and we want to share, yes, screen. Screen sharing. So I'm assuming you all are looking at abad.org. So, so how would we find this if we want to do? You can either do one chapter a day, it'll take you 3 years to get through, or what I recommend is doing 3 chapters a day, and you can get through it in 1 year. And the reason I recommend doing it 3 chapters a day, get through it in 1 year, is you can keep track of how far your progress is in it. I started it right after the High Holy Days, so as the year went on, soon as I was halfway through getting the High Holy Days again, I know I had reached the halfway point. So, for example, right now we're close to Pesach. So if you start it now, next year at Pesach you'll be done with it. Whereas if you only do the one chapter a day, the next year around Pesach, you're only going to be 1/3 of the way, and you're going to be thinking, I should have done 3 chapters a day, then I would be done with it. So how would we find it? Everybody, I think, knows how to get to Chabad.org. So if you just start typing in the search bar Rambam, it'll bring up Rambam Daily Study. Okay, then you can click on the Rambam Daily Study program. Then study tracks. And I remember tracks because I'm thinking like soundtracks because I want to do the audio video. Okay, so when you scroll down here, then you can either do the one chapter a day or the three. I recommend 3 chapters a day. Then it's going to bring you here. It'll give you the date and it'll give you the different classes you could take. You see, this one is 2 hours to get through 3 chapters. That means he's giving you shiurim, he's giving lots of opinions, lots of stuff that he's adding. Sometimes you'll even see some that are 10 minutes. Okay, that's some are even shorter than that, which means he's just giving you the general principles. He's not actually reading the whole text. So who I recommend is Rally Resnick. He pretty much just reads the text for you. So if you're listening to it while you're driving or while you're at work, you're getting the actual text that he's reading. The only time he deviates is he'll say things like, we're bringing up Yovel. We'll say, okay, we don't have Yovel today, and we'll learn what Yovel is. But for now, we don't have this because we don't have Yovel. So he'll only deviate from the text to tell you what you need to know to understand the text. Like he'll tell you, okay, we're going to be using these 3 Hebrew terms. First one is this, it means this. The second one is this, it means this. And the third one is this, and it means this. So the rest of the chapter, you hear me use this term, this is what I'm referring to. Other than that, he pretty much just follows the text for you. So Rally Resnick is who I recommend you follow. So when you watch, I don't know if I'm sharing sound or not, so I don't know if you heard him or not, but he'll just read it, and you can change the speed. If he's talking too slow, you can put it at 1.5 times speed. And if you're sitting around listening to him read it for you, you can scroll down here, and here is the actual text that he is reading. So you can pause it, you can scroll down here and look at what part is this he's talking about. Like tell you this is halakha yud, this is halakha yud aleph. So you'll know where he's at. You can scroll down and read what he's reading, and it's got the Hebrew also. So that's how I recommend going through. Okay. So now you know how to find that. Take several clicks to get to it, but you can, if you fall behind today, you can use the calendar here to move to the current day. So today he happens to be talking about tefillin, but we're going to talk about the introduction today. So introduction to Mishneh Torah. It should be the first one that pops up here. All right. So I'll read this. In the name of God, Lord of the world, then I will not be ashamed when I gaze at your mitzvot. The mitzvot given to Moses at Mount Sinai were all given together with their explanations, as implied by Exodus 24. And I will give you the tablets of stone, the Torah, and the mitzvah. The Torah refers to the written law, the mitzvah to explanation. God commanded us to fulfill the Torah according to the instructions of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is called the oral law. Moses, our teacher, personally transcribed the entire Torah before he died. He gave a Torah scroll to each tribe and placed another scroll in the ark as a testimonial. Deuteronomy states, take this Torah scroll and place it beside the ark, and it will be there as a testimonial. The mitzvah, the explanation of the Torah, he did not transcribe. Instead, he commanded it verbally to the elders, to Joshua, and to the totality of Israel. Deuteronomy states, be careful to observe everything that I prescribe to you. For this reason, it is called the oral law. We'll hear that referred to as Torah Shibal Peh. Even though the oral law was not transcribed, Moses, our teacher, taught it in its entirety to his court, to the 70 elders. Eleazar, Pinchas, and Joshua received the tradition from Moses. In particular, Moses transmitted the oral law to Joshua, who was his primary disciple, and instructed him regarding it. Similarly, throughout his life, Joshua taught the oral law. Many elders received the tradition from him. Eli received it from the elders, and Pinchas. Samuel received the tradition from Eli and his court. David received the tradition from Samuel and his court. Okay. Experienced Exodus from Egypt. He's a Levite. Heard teachings from Moses. He was, however, of low stature in Moses' age. Afterwards, he received the tradition from David as his court. I think this is going through the entire transmission here, the chain of transmission. Yeah. So I'm not going to read every single one of these names, but it tells you how it went from teacher to student throughout each generation, and it names everybody here in the unbroken chain. The last surviving member, Shimon the Just, he's included among the 120 elders, received the oral law from them. He served as high priest after Ezra. Then it continues. Hillel and Shammai, Yochanan ben Zakkai, colleagues of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Akiva's colleagues, received the tradition from Rabbi Eliezer the Great, Ban Gamliel, Yehuda. Okay. Then Rabbeinu HaKadosh composed the Mishnah. This is the first part of the Talmud, which contains the Mishnah and the Gemara. Okay, from the days of Moses, our teacher, until Rabbeinu HaKodesh, no one had composed a text for the purpose of teaching the oral law in public. Instead, in each generation, the head of the court or the prophet of that generation would take notes of the teachings which he received from his masters for himself and teach them verbally in public. Similarly, according to his own potential, each individual would write notes for himself of what he heard regarding the explanation of the Torah, its laws, and the new concepts that were deduced in each generation concerning laws that were not communicated by the oral tradition, but rather deduced using one of the 13 principles of biblical exegesis and accepted by the High Court. This situation continued until the age of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. He collected all the teachings, all the laws, and all the explanations and commentaries that were heard from Moses, our teacher, and which were taught by the courts in each generation concerning the entire Torah. From all these, he composed the text of the Mishnah. He taught it to the sages in public and revealed it to the Jewish people, who all wrote it down. They spread it in all places so that the oral law would not be forgotten by the Jewish people. Why did Rabbeinu HaKodesh make such an innovation? Here they're talking about Yehuda Hanasi. Instead of perpetuating the status quo, because he saw students becoming fewer, new difficulties constantly arising, the Roman Empire spreading itself throughout the world and becoming more powerful, and the Jewish people wandering and becoming dispersed in the far ends of the world. Therefore, he composed a single text that would be available to everyone so that it could be studied quickly and would not be forgotten. Throughout his entire life, he and his court taught the Mishnah to the masses. So he was concerned that these things were going to be forgotten, being dispersed. In order to remain a people, we have to do what keeps us together, which is the halakha. These are the great sages who were part of the court of Yehuda Hanasi and who received the tradition from his sons. And here again, it's just giving you the chain of transmission. Thousands of myriads of other sages received the tradition from Yehuda Hanasi together with these great sages. Even though all of the 11 sages mentioned above received the tradition from Rabbeinu HaKodesh and attended his study sessions, there are differences between them. At that time, Rabbi Yochanan was of lesser stature. Afterwards, he became a disciple of Rabbi Yanai and received instruction from him. Similarly, Rav received the tradition from Rabbi Yanai. Shemuel received the tradition from Rabbi Hanina ben Chama, I think it's how you say that. Rav composed the Sifri and the Sifra to explain the sources for the Mishnah. Rabbi Chia composed the Tosefta, it's like a supplement to the Mishnah, to explain the subjects discussed in the Mishnah. Rabbi Hoshaya and Bar Kafra composed the Baraitot to explain the matters discussed in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud in Eretz Israel, approximately 300 years after the destruction of the temple. Fun fact, Jerusalem Talmud, also called the Yerushalmi, was composed in Yavne, not really in Jerusalem. I guess they call it the Yerushalmi just to let you know that it was in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, just to distinguish it from the Babylonian Talmud, which was actually composed in Babylon. Okay, among the great sages who received the tradition from Rav and Shmuel were just more names. And the sages who received the tradition from Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda were this list of other rabbis. Thus, there were 40 generations of Rav Ashi back to Moses, our teacher of blessed memory. They were. And then here it's going to give you the list of those 40 generations. These were the people that got smicha from Moses. Smicha is what gives you the authority to judge. So here, every scholar will tell you that smicha ceased in around the 4th century. It's been sort of revived, but once something is destroyed completely, you can build a replica of it, but it's not going to be the same thing. Pretty much every scholar, every academic that you talk to is going to give you this rendition of it. There are those who believe, the folklore and legend, that they have smicha, who's an unbroken chain going back to Moses. Um, they can believe that. They can believe lots of things. Pretty much every scholar and academic believes that it ended. And the smicha that we have today is not the original smicha. But here, Rambam is giving you the unbroken chain going back to Moses. And here he's just reiterating what is in the Talmud. He's quoting what Pirkei Avot says. So this is not just Rambam making this up. He's telling you what the Talmud already says. Okay, and it gets back here from Joshua received it from Moses, our teacher, who received the tradition from the Almighty. Thus, the source of all these people's knowledge is God, the Lord of Israel. All the sages who were mentioned were the leaders of the generations. Among them were the heads of the academies, heads of the exile, and members of the great Sanhedrin. Together with them in each generation, there were thousands of myriads that heard their teachings. Okay, the Sanhedrin. This is the source of the halachot. Halacha is laws enacted by the Sanhedrin. Okay, so that's the court that the Torah is talking about in Parshat Shoftim when it says we have the mitzvah of lo tasor, not to stray to the left and right of the rulings of the court. That's not just any court. That's the Sanhedrin that's talking about. Why? Because they had smicha going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. This would give them the authority to judge. And also the Torah tells us that you will judge from the place that Hashem will choose, that place being the temple in Jerusalem, in the room of hewn stones. Okay, Ravina and Rav Ashi were the final generations of the sages of the Talmud. Rav Ashi composed the Babylonian Talmud in, I guess this is pronounced Shinar, approximately 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud. The intent of both Talmuds is to elucidate the words of the Mishnah, to explain its deeper points, and to relate to the new matters that were developed by each court from the era of Rabbeinu Kodesh until the composition of the Talmud. So when we're talking about the two Talmuds, each Talmud has the Mishnah and a Gemara. Okay, the Mishnah, this is the rulings of the Sanhedrin, composed by Hanasi, he filed all the notes. And then the Gemara is the commentary to it. So the Jerusalem Talmud has a Gemara, which is their commentary to the Mishnah based on their understanding of it in their area. The Babylonian Talmud also has a Gemara, which is their commentary to the Mishnah. So same Mishnah, two different Gemaras, okay, two different commentaries to the Mishnah. So when you hear Talmud, it means Mishnah plus Gemara equals Talmud. So which Talmud are we talking about? Usually it's the Babylonian Talmud that we're talking about when you just hear Talmud, because it's where most Jews were at the time. So it's more popular, and it was composed a little after the Jerusalem Talmud. So there was a period of time there where they had the Jerusalem Talmud that they could also comment on. Okay, for the entire body of knowledge stemming from the two Talmuds, the Tosefta, the Sifri, and the Sifra can be derived the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, the liable and those who are free of liability, the invalid and the valid was received in the tradition one person from another in a chain extending back to Moses at Mount Sinai. Also, the sources mentioned above relate those matters which were decreed by the sages and the prophets in each generation in order to build the fence around the Torah. We were explicitly taught about this practice of building fences by Moses, as implied by Leviticus, and ye shall observe my precepts, which can be interpreted to mean make safeguards for my precepts. Although we have to distinguish what are the rabbinical safeguards and what is the actual Torah commandment, the mitzvah itself. Similarly, it includes the customs and ordinances that were ordained and practiced in each generation according to the judgment of the governing court of that generation. It is forbidden to deviate from these decisions, as implied by Deuteronomy. Do not deviate from the instructions that they will give you, left or right. There, it is talking about the Sanhedrin. In each generation, according to the judgment of the governing court of that generation, um, that had the authority to govern. That would be the Sanhedrin. It's forbidden to deviate from those decisions because what they enacted is the halakha. That's the law that you're required to follow that Deuteronomy is quoting here. Do not deviate from the instructions that they will give you. They not just being three random rabbis today that agree on something. They being the Sanhedrin. That's what the Torah is talking about. It also includes marvelous judgments and laws which were not received from Moses, but rather derives from the courts of the later generations based on the principles of biblical exegesis. The elders of those generations made these decisions and concluded that this was the knowledge, this was the law. Rav Ashi included in the Talmud this entire body of knowledge stemming from Moses, his teacher, until his own. The sages of the Mishnah, the sages of the Mishnah, these are the Tanaim, these are the generations that had the Smicha, also composed other texts to explain the words of Torah. Rabbi Hoshaya, the disciple of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, composed an explanation of the book of Genesis. Rabbi Yishmael composed an explanation beginning at these are the names. This is the book of Shemot, Exodus, until the conclusion of the Torah. This is called the Mechilta. Rabbi Akiva also composed a Mechilta. Other sages of following generations composed other collections of the interpretations of the verses of Midrashim. All of these works are composed before the Babylonian Talmud. So it's listing a lot of other works here. The Mishnah, the Gemaras, the Talmuds, Sifri, the Sifra, the Mechilta. Rambam went through all of that as he's going to explain. Thus, Ravina, Rav Ashi, their colleagues represent the final era of the great sages of Israel who transmitted oral law. They passed decrees, ordained practices, and put into effect customs. These decrees, ordinances, and customs spread out among the entire Jewish people in the places where they lived. The court of Rav Ashi composed the Talmud and completed it in the time of his son. The Jewish people became further dispersed throughout the lands, reaching distant extremes and the far removed islands. Strife sprung up throughout the world, and paths of travel became endangered by troops. Torah study decreased, and the Jews ceased entering the yeshivot in thousands and myriads, as was customary previously. Instead, individuals, the remnants of whom God called, would gather in each city, each county, and occupy themselves in Torah study and devote themselves to understanding the text of the sages and learning the path of judgment from them. Every court that was established after the conclusion of the Talmud, regardless of the country in which it was established, issued decrees, enacted ordinances, and established customs for the people of that country or of those several countries. These practices, however, were not accepted throughout the Jewish people because of the distance between their different settlements and the disruption of communication between them. Since each of these courts were considered to be individuals, and the High Court of 71 judges had been defunct for many years before the composition of the Talmud, people in one country could not be compelled to follow the practices of another country, nor is one court required to sanction decrees which another court had declared in its locale. Similarly, if one of the Gaonim, this is the generation before Rambam, interpreted the path judgment in a certain way, while the court in which arose afterward interpreted the proper approach to the matter in a different way, the opinion of the first need not be adhered to absolutely. Rather, whichever position appears to be correct, whether the first or the last is accepted. Okay, so where you'll find this in Mishneh Torah is in Hilchot Mamre. This is where we get the explanation of how halakha actually functions. Something that a lot of rabbis do not understand because they don't read Mishneh Torah. They're just taught what they've been taught by another rabbi who also never read Mishneh Torah. So Hilchot Mamring explains in better detail what this paragraph just says, just gave us. The court of 71 judges has been defunct for many years. Therefore, what's being enacted in these different towns is minhagims, customs and traditions. That's why it's not binding on anyone else. Only the people in that community that accept that minhag. People in one country cannot be compelled to follow the practices of another country, the minhagim, the customs and traditions. So this is why you'll have things like kitniot. People, the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim have different views on this, and you can't compel one to behave like the other because it's just a tradition. It's not a halakha. Court that would enact the halakha, which is binding on all of the Jewish people, no matter where they are, has been defunct for many years. This is why different communities are able to interpret the path of judgments in different localities, different locales, in ways that make sense to them. But we have to understand the difference between them enacting a minhag, custom and tradition, versus a law, halacha, enacted by the actual Sanhedrin, and what is the actual mitzvah in the Torah. Okay, so these principles apply regarding the judgments, decrees, and ordinances and customs of the minhagim, which were established after the conclusion of the Talmud. That's what makes it minhagim, not halacha, is because of the timeline when they were established. However, all the matters mentioned by the Babylonian Talmud are incumbent on the entire Jewish people to follow. We must compel each and every city and each country to accept all the customs that were put into practice by the sages of the Talmud. Here, I would say the binding practices are, when it says Talmud, it's the Mishnah, because these were the Tanaim that had the smicha, that had the authority to judge and act halacha. The Gemara, our sages commenting on it, did not have smicha. What's the difference between somebody in the Gemara does not have smicha, commenting on the Mishnah, and somebody watching this video that does not have smicha, commenting on the Mishnah? It's a later generation, not have the original smicha that the sages in the Mishnah had. Assuming you knew the Hebrew as well as they did, your opinion is just as valid as theirs. But the opinions of the sages in the Mishnah, they had the smicha that they had been given in an unbroken chain that we read in the beginning of this. So their opinions, they're the ones that had the authority to enact the law that's binding. So that's what needs to be followed. Okay, the Talmudic sages who established ordinances, decrees, customs, practice arrived at legal decisions and taught the people concerning certain judgments representing the totality of the sages of Israel, or at least the majority of them. They received the tradition regarding fundamental aspects of the Torah in its entirety, generation after generation, in a chain beginning with Moses, our teacher. All the sages who arose after the conclusion of the Talmud and comprehended its wisdom and whose prowess gained them a reputation are called the Gaonim. Again, this is a generation before Rambam, Gaonim. Rambam's generation was the Rishonim. All these Gaonim that arose in Eretz Israel, Babylonia, Spain, France taught the approach of the Talmud, revealing its hidden secrets and explaining its points, since the Talmud's manner of expression is very deep. Furthermore, it's composed in Aramaic, a mixture of other tongues, language was understood by the people of Babylonia in the era where the Talmud was composed. However, in other places, and even in Babylonia, in the era of the Gaonim, a person cannot understand this language unless he has studied it. The inhabitants of each city would ask many questions of each Gaon who lived in their age to explain the difficult matters that existed in the Talmud. They would reply to them according to their wisdom. The people who asked questions would collect their replies and make texts for them so that they could consider them in depth. Also, the Gaonim of each generation composed texts to explain the Talmud. Some of them explained only certain halachot, others explained selected chapters that had created difficulty in their age. Still others explained the entire tractates and orders. Also, the Gaonim composed texts regarding the decisions of Torah law regarding what is permitted and what is forbidden. Well, when one is liable, when one is free of liability, with regard to subjects that were necessary at the time so that they would be accessible to the grasp of the person who would not comprehend the depths of the Talmud. This is the work of God which was performed by the Gaonim of Israel from the completion of the Talmud to the present date, 1,108 years after the destruction of the temple, 4,937 years after the creation of the world. That's the claim. This is saying basically everybody the jobs of the rabbis to go through the Talmud and derive the law from it. Talmud, which contains lots of stories, lots of debates, prophecies, midrashim, agadot, lots of things. So if you needed to know what's the law, what do I do? Is this permitted? Is it forbidden? What's allowed, what's not? You would have to go through all this literature in the Talmud. Not just the Talmud. There's also the Tosefta, the Sifri, the Sfarad, the Chilta. There's large amounts of rabbinic literature that one would have to go through. So that was the job of a rabbi, to know this stuff, because your average person didn't have time working from sun up to sundown 6 days a week. They didn't have time for this. So this was the job of the rabbis, to go through all this material and derive what's the law. Okay, at this time, we have been beset by additional difficulties. Everyone feels financial pressure. The wisdom of our sages has become lost. Very important statement there for everyone saying that, oh, every word for 60,000 pages of literature has been memorized. Every word of the debate passed down in every generation. It's been lost. And the comprehension of our men of understanding has become hidden. Therefore, those explanations, laws, and replies which the Gaonim composed and considered to be fully explained material have become difficult to grasp in our age. Only a select few comprehend these matters in the proper way. Needless to say, there is confusion with regard to the Talmud itself, both the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, Sifri, the Tosefta, for they require a breadth of knowledge, a spirit of wisdom, and much time for appreciating the proper path regarding what is permitted and forbidden, and the other laws of the Torah. Not many people have the proper understanding of that. Therefore, this is Rambam speaking in his introduction, girded my loins, I, Moses, the son of Maimon, Spain, I relied upon the rock, blessed be he. I contemplated all these texts, all of them. He went through all of them and sought to compose a work which would include the conclusions derived from all of these texts regarding the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, and the remainder of the Torah's laws, all in a clear and concise terms, so that the entire oral law can be organized in each person's mouth without questions or objections. This is one of the most important statements in this entire Mishneh Torah, is this right here. He went through all of these materials, not just the Talmud. He went through all of it. And he extracted the halakha, the law, from it. So you don't have to go through all the debates, all the stories. If you're doing the Daf Yomi, just the Talmud alone, 1 page a day is going to take 7.5 years. If you just want the law, you can go through Mishneh Torah, 3 chapters a day, 1 year. So let's say 2 people watching this. They take different approaches. One person says, I want to go through the Talmud. And the other person says Mishneh Torah. So the person going through the Talmud, doing the Daf Yomi, it's going to take him 7 years to go through that. If you just want the law, you can get the law from Mishneh Torah. The guy that goes through Mishneh Torah can go through it 7 times, 7 years, which means he's read each law 7 times in 7 years. But the person that's going through the Talmud has went through the Talmud once in 7 years. So if there's a particular law, a halakha that we're dealing with, who knows it better? The guy that's been through it 7 times, or the guy that heard that law once 7 years ago when he started, because that one was at the beginning and now he's finishing it at the end. It makes more sense. If you want the law, Mishneh Torah is the place to go. That's not to say there's no value, there's no wisdom in the Talmud. But if you just want to know what the law is, Mishneh Torah is the place to go for it. That's why he created this. Instead of, so let's go back to that that last part of that. If you from all these texts regarding the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, and the remainder of the Torah's laws, all in a clear and concise terms, so that it's easy for everyone to understand, so that the entire oral law, all of it in its entirety, could be organized in each person's mouth without questions or objections. Of course, there will be questions and objections, but he's going to put it in a clear and concise way that's going to make sense to pretty much everyone. Instead of arguments, this one claiming such and another claiming such, this text, Mishneh Torah, will allow for clear and correct statements based on the judgments that result from all the texts and explanations mentioned above. From the days of Rabbeinu HaKodesh until the present, this will make it possible for all the laws to be revealed to both those of lesser stature and those of greater stature regarding every single mitzvah, and also all the practices that were ordained by the sages and the prophets. Now, what does it mean? Those of lesser stature and those of greater stature? We can interpret this to mean those of lesser stature maybe have lower IQ, maybe they're ignorant, they have not learned anything, and those of greater stature, very intelligent people who have studied and learned a lot. So this will make it possible for all of the laws, all of the halachot. And we're going to see that when he says all the laws, he's going to mean all the mitzvot, Torah commandments, and the halachot, all of the laws enacted by the Sanhedrin, to be revealed in both those of lesser stature and those of greater stature, for everybody, regarding every single mitzvah, and also the practices that were ordained by the sages and prophets. To summarize, which is really maybe where we should have started to make this shorter, but to summarize, the intent of this text, the Mishneh Torah, is that a person will not need another text at all with regard to any Jewish law. Rather, this text will be a compilation of the entire oral law, including also the ordinances, customs, and decrees that were enacted from the time of Moses, our teacher, until the completion of the Talmud, as were explained by the Gaonim in the text that they composed after the Talmud. Let's go over this paragraph one more time. The intent is that a person will not need another text at all with regard to any Jewish law. This will be a compilation of the entire oral law, meaning this is all you need, Mishneh Torah. Now, whenever I say this, people get offended and they say, what do you mean I can't read other stuff? Nobody said you can't read other stuff. I mean, it says you don't need any other books to understand the law. If you want to read the Garden of Emunah, go ahead. If you like Rashi's commentary, you are free to read it. But you will not need that to comprehend the oral law. All you need is Mishneh Torah. Meaning you can go to Mishneh Torah and stay there. And you can paskin halakha from it, 100%. You do not need any other book. This does not prohibit you from reading any other book. I had a rabbi challenge me on that one and say, oh, well, when you explain it that way, that makes sense. Well, I explained it exactly the way it says, because you don't need any other book. It doesn't say you can't read anything else. So therefore, I, Rambam, have called this text the Mishneh Torah, the second to the Torah. Don't confuse Mishnah in the Talmud with Mishneh. Mishneh refers to the second. So Mishneh Torah, second to the Torah, with the intent that a person should first study the written law. This is Torah, and then study this text, Mishneh Torah, and comprehend the entire oral law from it, without having to study any other text between the two. I saw fit to divide this text into separate halachot pertaining to each particular subject, and within the context of a single subject, to divide these halachot into chapters. Each and every chapter is divided into smaller halachot so they can be ordered each one's memory. So they're all organized in a very, very good way, instead of finding a law about this in Pesachim and another law about the same topic in Reuben, and another law about the same topic in somewhere else in the Talmud. They're all going to be organized in the same chapters. Regarding the halachot, which pertain to specific subjects, some halachot contain the laws governing only one mitzvah, this being a mitzvah that has many matters of the tradition associated with it, and its subject in its own right. Other halachot contain the laws governing many mitzvot, since they deal with the same subject matter. For I have divided this text according to the topics, not according to the number of mitzvot, as will become clear to the reader. And I'll tell you in the beginning of each book which mitzvot are going to be covered here. So you'll know as you're reading which ones you're going to be dealing with. The number of mitzvot which are incumbent on us at all times is 613. 248 are the positive commandments, an allusion to their number, the number of limbs in the human body. According to Rambam, he was a doctor. I asked a doctor once, he used to be a surgeon, then he went back to school to become an anesthesiologist. I figured he would know. He said, is it really true? There's 248 number of limbs, as in like ligaments, and tendons and all this in the human body. Is like, I don't know, never counted them. This is the claim they make though. 365 are negative commandments, prohibitions, allusion to their number of days in a solar year. Okay, so what he's referring to here is Mishneh Torah has been separated. It used to be Sefer HaMitzvot, Book of the Commandments, which gives you the Torah commandments and their explanations. And then Mishneh Torah, which is 14 volumes. Some of them are so big that now it's like 18 because it split some of them, like Sefer Zemanim. It's so big, instead of being one book, now it's two books. You have Sefer Zemanim 1 and Sefer Zemanim 2. So now when you buy Mishneh Torah, you're going to get the Mishneh Torah's 14 volumes, maybe now 18, for the halachot, for the laws. Sefer HaMitzvot is going to be a separate book. Two books separating the positive and the negative commandments. So then this concludes Rambam's introduction. Okay, so if you have Mishneh Torah, and let me stop screen sharing. Hopefully I was screen sharing with you. So if you have the Mishneh Torah, but you do not have Sefer HaMitzvot, the first book in the Mishneh Torah is going to give you the translator's introduction. Then 8 pages later, it's going to give you Rambam's introduction, which we just read. And then it goes to the enumeration of the mitzvot, positive commandments and the negative commandments. Okay, so let's go there, which starts on page 38, so I can show you. If you do not have Sefer HaMitzvot, you just have the Mishneh Torah, okay, all the commandments are enumerated here. So it's going to show you the positive commandments. Number one, the first positive commandments is the mitzvah to know that there is a God, as Exodus states, I am God, your Lord. Number two, to unify him, as Deuteronomy 6:4 states, God is our Lord, God is one. Number three, to love him, as Deuteronomy 6:5 states, and you shall love the Lord your God. So it's just going to list them. It's not going to give you the explanation. So let's look at the third one. To love him, as Deuteronomy 6:5 states, and you shall love the Lord your God. That's all it says when it lists the 613 mitzvot in Mishneh Torah. Okay, if you get Sefer HaMitzvot, it's going to give you the actual explanation for that. So let's look at that one. The third one, to love God. It's going to give you the explanation, which is going to say, by this injunction, we are commanded to love God. That is to say, to dwell upon and contemplate his commandments, his injunctions, and his works, so that we may obtain a conception of him, and in conceiving him, attain absolute joy. This constitutes the love of God, and it is obligatory. It's obligatory because it's a Torah commandment. As the Sifri says, since it is said, and you shall love the Lord your God, The question arises, how is one to manifest his love for the Lord? Scripture therefore says, and these words which I command thee this day shall be upon thy heart, for through this, the contemplation of God's words, you will learn to discern him whose word called the universe into existence. We have thus made it clear to you that through this act of contemplation, you will attain a conception of God and reach that stage of joy in which love of him will follow of necessity. Now, this is an interesting point right here. The sages say that this commandment also includes an obligation to call upon all mankind to serve him and to have faith in him. For just as you praise and extol anybody you love and call upon others to also love him, so if you love the Lord to the extent of the conception of his true nature to which you have attained, you will undoubtedly call upon the foolish and ignorant to seek knowledge of the truth which you have already acquired. So just as your understanding of Hashem and Torah and Judaism is, you, in order to fulfill this mitzvah, are also supposed to be spreading that to other people. So much for saying we don't proselytize in Judaism, right? We're actually commanded to by this mitzvah. Continuing on, as the Sifri says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God. This means that you should make him beloved of man as Abraham your father did, as it is stated, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. This is what Abraham was doing. He was making converts. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. That is to say, just as Abraham, being a lover of the Lord, as scripture testifies, Abraham, my friend, by the power of his conception of God and out of his great love for him, summoned mankind to believe, you too must so love him and summon mankind onto him. But interesting thing there is that it ties the love of God, which is something that you might not feel naturally. It ties it to the understanding, just as in a new relationship with a new spouse, you're thinking about them all day. This is what Rambam ties it to all day long. You're thinking about Hashem conceiving his ways, his commandments. This is how you fulfill the mitzvah of loving Hashem by having these things on your mind all day long, the same way you would with someone that you love. Because it's natural for parents to love your children. You don't have to be taught how to do that. It just comes naturally. There are people who say loving Hashem does not come naturally. That's why we have to be told to do it. That's why it's one of the mitzvahs to do it. So how do you do it? Through action, not just something that's naturally there in you already. You have to be in control of the action. So that you are in control of the contemplation, the learning, the studying, keeping them on your mind all day. Then from that, the love will come naturally. Okay, so we went through Rambam's introduction to the Mishneh Torah. We understand the difference between Sefer HaMitzvot, which is the 613 Torah commandments with their explanations, and the Mishneh Torah, which is going to give you the halachot, the laws enacted from the Sanhedrin. Even if you don't have Sefer HaMitzvot, you could still have the list of the 613 commandments by getting Mishneh Torah, which you can do for free online at Chabad.org. You can have a physical copy. So now I want to go to the introduction. If you have the physical copy, okay, that's where this whole thing stemmed from. There was a question in there. So remember, the first 8 pages here in the physical copy is not Rambam's introduction. Rambam's introduction starts on page 16. The first 8 pages before that, page 8 to 16, that is the translator's introduction. The person translating and printing this, he gave his own introduction. So that's where the question that made me want to make this video came from. Which has been so long now, I forget where it was that it was in. Let me find it real quick. Okay, so in the translator's introduction, he's saying, despite the intensity of the initial opposition, with little more than a century after Rambam's death, the Mishneh Torah was universally accepted as a transformational work. Why? Because now you don't have to go through the Talmud anymore. You can just get the halakha from Mishneh Torah. It took the power away from the rabbis to now, whether you're a person of lesser stature or greater stature, you can be fluent in mitzvot and halakha by just reading Mishneh Torah. You don't need the rabbi to tell you what the halakha is anymore. You can paskin what the halakha is, which, by the way, is a completely valid way to do it today. Ken Spiro, he teaches at Mishneh Torah, which is a yeshiva in Jerusalem. He says, he teaches all the students that anyone can paskin halakha. You don't even have to be in the smicha program. It's the pental yid. You can paskin as long as you are going by one of the Rishonim, like Rambam or Rashi. I don't know why he mentions Rashi, because Rashi's a commentator that don't deal halakha. Rambam for sure. So you can paskin halakha. This is what they're teaching in Mishneh Torah today, by going by what Rambam says. Yitzhak Ritowitz, he teaches at Or Sameach, another yeshiva in Israel. He says the same thing. It's a completely valid way to do it today. Okay, so Mishneh Torah was universally accepted as a transformational work. His work revolutionized the conventional approach to Torah scholarship, setting the stage for future advances. Both scholars and laymen came to appreciate the need for codifications, which would first summarize the Talmudic give and take and the diverse rabbinical opinions, and then provide clear-cut directives for their observance. Subsequent codifications of Torah law, examples like the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, refer to the Rambam's work extensively. Indeed, large portions of the laws in the Shulchan Aruch are direct quotes from the Mishneh Torah. It's true. If you look at laws of conversions, for example, it's in Yevamot in the Talmud. In the Mishneh Torah, it's in Asuri Biyah, chapter 13 and 14. It's 2 chapters, giving you what's in the Talmud. When you get to the Shulchan Aruch, it's in Yoredeah 268, 1 chapter. It's an abridged version of what you find in the Shulchan Aruch. So if you want a quick 10-minute read to know the laws of conversion, you can get it in the Shulchan Aruch, Yoredeah 268. If you want a more thorough, in-depth, complete version of it, it's 2 chapters. Mishneh Torah, Asuri Biyah, chapter 13 and 14. So it's one of many reasons why Mishneh Torah is superior to the other codifications, because it's the only complete codification of halakha that we have. And Chabad recognizes that to this day, no work has been done that compares to it, which is why they have it on Chabad.org, because they know you really can't learn halakha without Rambam. So even the translator in his introduction is saying a large proportion of the laws of the Shulchan Aruch are direct quotes from the Mishneh Torah. About 90% of it actually is Rambam. So if you're reading Shulchan Aruch, it's about 90% Rambam, because the Machaber Yosef Karo took the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam, and he compiled them. Anytime 2 of those 3 agreed on something, it went into the Shulchan Aruch. Whichever one disagreed, that's the one that gets thrown out. But we learn here in Mishneh Torah that the Rif is, Rambam says the Rif is flawless. He can count on, I don't remember, 1 or 2 hands the number of times he disagrees with the Rif. So let's say it's 2 hands. That means there's a maximum of 10 times that the Rambam disagrees with the Rif. So if the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam, 3 of them, let's say this is one of those maximum 10 times, Rambam disagrees with the Rif. That doesn't mean Rambam's opinion gets thrown out. This is one of the times where the Rosh agrees with the Rambam instead of the Rif. Now you have 2 or 3 opinions, the Rosh and the Rambam, which means Rambam's opinion gets into Shulchan Aruch. And we already know 90% of the time Rambam agrees with the Rif, so that's 2 of the 3 opinions. That's in the Shulchan Aruch. 2 of the 3, mostly Rambam. Usually when there's a disagreement, it's the Rosh that brings in the disagreement with the Rambam. Okay, nevertheless, although the Rambam's approach in the Mishneh Torah became accepted and the text itself was given a place of renown in Jewish scholarship, to a large extent, the Rambam's goal in composing the text was never fulfilled. I think it was fulfilled, actually. With the exception of a few isolated Jewish communities like Yemen, the Mishneh Torah was never considered to be the basic text for the study of oral law. Instead, it became viewed as a book for expert scholars, a source to consult after studying a portion of the Talmud in depth or as part of a detailed analysis of the development of a particular law. Instead of being seen as a single unified entity, the Mishneh Torah would be consulted as a reference in text, a reference text, in order to see the Rambam's individual approach to a particular law or Talmudic premise. So let's go back and see what that says here. The Mishneh Torah, which we learned from Rambam himself, his introduction is clear and concise in order to give a person of lesser stature or greater stature a complete understanding of the entire oral law. Okay, this says it was never considered to be the basic text for the study of oral law. Instead, it became viewed as a book for expert scholars, a source to consult. Okay, we're going to see there's times where the halakha is not clear in the Talmud. So sometimes there's three different opinions that you can go by in the Talmud. Rambam is giving you the halakha. If it says the sages say, meaning the Sanhedrin ruled this is the halakha, that's the halakha. This is what Rambam's going to tell you. If it's not clear, there's three different opinions, and we don't know which one the sages ruled on, then there's three different options. There's three different choices. How do we proceed? There, Rambam picked one of the three, and he gave you his rendition. This, I think, is the halakha that makes sense. So for this translator to come in and say, this is a book viewed for expert scholars, they're saying they don't know what the halakha is because it's not clear. So let's resort to Rambam's Mishneh Torah. Let's see what Rambam said to check. So they want to know what Rambam's opinion is. So they're showing that they have so much respect for Rambam. The scholars are saying, we don't know. Let's see what Rambam said. This is why this is so respected, and that you still find it on Chabad's website. Even though Chabad claims to not really go by it, they know you can't do without it, which is why they have it. So it's something for experts to consult with because of how valuable it is. But it's so simple, anybody can use this and paskin halakha from it. That was the intent. That was Rambam's goal. So I think he did achieve that goal. So I'll show you real quick why I think that. Let's go to Sefer Kedishah, which is where we'll find laws of conversions. Suribia, chapter 12, halakha 17. It says, whenever any of the Gentiles convert and accept all of the mitzvot in Torah, or a servant is freed, they are considered as Jews with regard to all matters. Easy. Anyone can understand this. But let's read the commentary. Whenever any of the Gentiles convert and accept all of the mitzvot in the Torah, commentary 44, as described in chapter 13. It's going to give you the process there, how to do it. Or a servant is freed, commentary 45, at which time his conversion process is completed. Makes sense? They are considered as Jews with regard to all matters. Commentary 46. There is no difference between a convert and a native Israelite with regard to any matter of Jewish observance. Makes sense. One law for the native born and one law for everyone. One law for us all to go by. So I think he did achieve his goal, that this is explained in such a clear and concise way that the most simple people can understand it. As we see, even the commentary just gives you basic kindergarten level commentary because it's so clear, it's so easy to understand this. So what the translator is saying, oh, this is a book for scholars, for experts to consult in because they don't know the halakha themselves. So that's why scholars consult with this. But the layman, the ordinary person, can absolutely paskin halakha from this, which is why they're teaching it in Mishneh Torah and Or Sameach today, because it's a completely valid way to paskin halakha for anybody. Okay, last paragraph from the translator's introduction. To a large extent, this translation is intended to allow an English reader the chance to fulfill the Rambam's original purpose in composing the text as a halakhic work. particularly for those of the Ashkenazi community, the Mishneh Torah can no longer be used to derive a final ruling. It can absolutely be used to derive a final ruling on everything that came up until this time. It 100% can. There are people who choose not to use this in Ashkenazi rulings, and I'm going to give you an example of that with the tzitzit, the tchelet. But you absolutely can use this to derive a final ruling. Now, can you use this to derive a final ruling on things that Rambam didn't deal with, like electricity? Because electricity we didn't have in Rambam's time? No, because it wasn't in his time. So you can use other things to paskin on driving, all these modern day things that we have that Sanhedrin didn't deal with, the Rambam didn't deal with. You're not going to find things like that in here because it wasn't in their time. But those things are not halachot. Those things are minhagim, how you deal with this. These are the customs and traditions that Ashkenazi and other communities come up with, how to deal with these modern things. Remember, we read earlier that what one community does in one country is not binding on another country. Because when things like automobiles come up, we have to say, okay, how does this affect us? How does Zoom affect us? With things like having a minion. Different communities are going to come up with different answers. That's why it's minhagim, customs and traditions. It's not halacha because they didn't have Zoom in the time of the Sanhedrin. So your minhagim you can come up with, but you can't enforce it on other people because your minhagim is not halachot. So yes, you can absolutely use this to derive a final ruling, but things like minhagim is not a final ruling. It's just what each community comes up with to deal with these things. So yes, it can be used to derive a final ruling, unless you're talking about minhagim. An effort has been made in our commentary to point out the subsequent sources and decisions, but in no way should our text be relied upon in regard to halakha lema'aseh, the practical halakha on what you do. So we're going to read the commentary in that example that I told you I'm going to show you about the tchelet and tzitzit. But an effort has been made in our commentary to point out subsequent sources. This is the one thing that they asked Rambam. Do you have any regrets about Mishneh Torah? He said the one regret that he had is that he didn't give you the sources. So when he's giving you a halakha, where did it come from? Did it come from the Mishnah? Did it come from the Gemara? Did it come from the Tosefta? He didn't provide that source. Yosef Karo came up with the Kesef Mishnah. So if you want to know when you're reading Mishneh Torah, where is Rambam getting this source from? You can get a Kesef Mishnah, and that'll tell you where Yosef Karo thinks the Rambam got it from. However, here he's saying he's going to give you the sources in the commentary, which is helpful. But just remember, commentary is not Rambam's Mishneh Torah. It's a commentator's opinion on Rambam's Mishneh Torah. But the sources for where the commentary is getting their opinions from is helpful, and we'll look at that. Nevertheless, by studying Mishneh Torah from beginning to end, as Rambam originally conceived, one can receive an overview of the entire body of Jewish law, something you will not get from Shulchan Aruch or the Tur or the Mishnah Brura. Although we may not accept all of Rambam's decisions, okay, you're allowed to disagree with Rambam. I disagree with Rambam in some things. So although we may not accept all of the Rambam's decisions, the manner in which he organizes and explains Torah law allows us to appreciate the basic principles on which our halakha is based. So this is not saying that you cannot go by Mishneh Torah alone. This is saying there are people that will disagree with him, and they might decide to go with the Shulchan Aruch, which is fine, or the Mishnah Brura, also fine. That's not a problem. That's not to say that just because somebody prefers to go by the Shulchan Aruch, you cannot get halakha from Mishneh Torah. Okay, so the example that I wanted to give on that is see, take a screenshot of what's in the Mishnah. When something may not be so clear in the Mishnah. Okay, so in Mishnah Menachot 4, the absence of the sky blue tachelet strings, this is the string of the tzitzit, it has been dyed with tachelet, does not prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah of ritual fringes with the white strings. And the absence of white strings does not prevent fulfillment of the mitzvah with the sky blue strings. If one only has one, he wears it without the other. Absence of the, okay, then it moves on to fulfillment. Okay, so um, that doesn't really tell you how to make the tachelet. So everybody understands what the tzitzit are, the fringes that we'll have on our talit. Some people have a talit katan, like a t-shirt that has tzitzit hanging down from them. So we're not really sure how to make the tachelet anymore. There's a couple theories out there, different animals that it comes from. One is like the cuttlefish that they think, but we don't know for sure which one it is. So this is why most tzitzit today is only white, because we don't know how to make the tachelet. But side note, I saw a documentary where there was about it. And there was a guy saying that if he knew that this was the tachelet that Moses wore, he said, I don't know if I would wear it. My father didn't wear tachelet. My rabbi didn't wear tachelet. I'm better than my father and my rabbi. Okay. In my opinion, the motivation for wearing the tachelet should be because Hashem commanded you to wear it. If you know this is the tachelet that Hashem said to wear, that's what you should be wearing. It's like he's in some way saying, I'm not doing this because Hashem commanded. I'm doing this because my father and my rabbi, and my father's rabbi, and my rabbi's rabbi told me this. That to me is not the right motivation, keeping the Torah commandments. Anyway, as we read from the screenshot on my phone, the tachelet, we don't know how to make it today. How many strings are supposed to be dyed with tachelet? It doesn't really say. It says you're supposed to have tachelet, but how many? Is it one? Is it two? Is it half of the tzitzit is supposed to be tachelet? The Mishnah doesn't really say. So this is one of the examples where we don't know. So this is something you're allowed to disagree with Rambam on. He's going to give you an opinion on how to do it. This is what makes it, his rendition of the halakha. And because it's complete, he covers every topic, including this. But because it's not really clear, the Sanhedrin didn't come out and say, this is how you do it. You need 4 strings, 8 of them, because you're going to fold them in half, through the hole of the garment. So 3.5 should be white, meaning 7 that are hanging down. And half of 1 string should be dyed blue, giving you 1 of 8 blue. Sanhedrin didn't say that. So the Sanhedrin also didn't come out and say you should have 4 strings, half of them. 2 complete strings should be dyed, so that when you fold them in half, you have 4 that are dyed blue and 4 that are white, 4 of 8. They didn't say it. It's not clear. So let's read what Rambam says here. 1 of the 8 strands should be tachelet. And then there's a commentary there, which we're going to read. The other 7 should be white. Okay, so this is Rambam's rendition of it. So let's look at the commentary. Though the 8 strands come from folding 4 larger strands, only half of one of these strands should be dyed. The other half should remain its natural color, white. Okay, so you put 4 strings through the hole. They're folded down, so now you have 8 coming down. Half of one of those 4 strings is dyed blue, so 1 of the 8 will be blue. The Ravad disagrees with this point and maintains that one of the larger strands should be dyed in its entirety, thus producing 2 smaller strands that are dyed tachelet. So 1 complete string of the 4 should be blue, according to the Ravad. So when you fold it in half, you'll have 2 of the 8 will be blue. The Tur in Orach Chaim 10 and other Ashkenazic authorities maintain that 2 of the 4 strands were tachelet and 2 were white. So 2 of the complete strands were blue, and 2 were white. So when you fold them in half, 4 are blue and 4 are white. So there's 3 different opinions. Why is there 3 different opinions? Because the Sanhedrin did not give us a final ruling on it. So Rambam is giving you his opinion, which you are 100% allowed to paskin by. And then there's 2 other sources here that disagree, that are allowed to disagree, because the Sanhedrin's not clear. If the Sanhedrin would have ruled this is how you do it, then that's how you do it. And you don't disagree. The reason there's different opinions is because it's not clear in this instance. So this is why the translator was saying, okay, there's other Ashkenazi that say you can't go by this. No, you absolutely can. It doesn't mean they're wrong. In this instance, for choosing one of the other opinions to go by instead of Rambam's, and you're 100% allowed to disagree with Rambam, but you're also allowed to paskin accordingly. So which is the right way to do the Tehillah? Half of 1 string, 1 of 7, 1 whole string, 2 of 8, or 2 whole strings, 4 of 8. You could do either way because it's not clear. Although it's interesting in the commentary that it says significantly, archaeological excavations have uncovered tzitzit belonging to Bar Kokhba's soldiers. 1 of the 8 strands was dyed Techelet. 1 of 8. The exact opinion that Rambam gave us how to do the halakha is what archaeologists have found. And in this commentary, it even shows you a picture of how you put the 4 strands through the hole. So you have 8 coming down. 1 of the 8 is dyed, and that's what they found. Only 1 of 8. That's what the archaeologists have found. Matching Rambam's opinion. Does this mean you can't go with the other 2 opinions? You can. Although this is one of many examples how often Rambam gets it right. So, I don't know how long the video was, but that's my introduction to the Mishneh Torah. I encourage all of you guys to go through the Mishneh Torah 3 chapters a day. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or anyone else that you find competent to answer your questions on this, but highly recommend Mishneh Torah. But after going through Mishneh Torah, now you'll know the complete codification of the halakha according to Rambam. The only thing that he was disappointed in is that he didn't give you the sources for it. Then you can go through the Mishnah. This is the shortest way to do it. Because the Mishnah, the Tanaim, these are the sages that had smicha going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Then you know, I remember hearing this in the Mishneh Torah, and now here it is in the Mishnah. This is where Rambam's getting it, the Mishnah. If you've gone through the Mishneh Torah, now you go through the Mishnah, and there's something that's not in the Mishnah, that means it comes from somewhere else. Maybe it's the Sifri, maybe it's the Sifra, maybe it's the Mechilta, maybe it's the Babylonian Talmud, maybe it's the Yerushalmi. I don't know. You know it comes from somewhere, but it's not in the Mishnah. It means it comes from somewhere else. The authoritative part is the Mishnah, which is really, if you want to paskin for yourself, you can just go by the Mishnah. That's the best place to go because the Gemara is just a commentary to the Mishnah. But if you don't want to go through all of that stuff and you just want to know what is the law, Mishneh Torah is where to get it from. But you're going to find things in there like a bunch of topics that are not going to be covered in the Mishnah. That's where you know you can have different opinions on it. Just go with Rambam's. If someone else's opinion makes more sense to you than Rambam's, go with that. But the authoritative stuff comes from the Mishnah. So that's my opinion. All right. Any questions? Just send them. Comments, leave them below. Thank you for watching, everybody.